is up with pickleball?
It's-
It's everywhere.
Pickleball is kind of a tennis game on a shorter court, and older people are playing it. And I got a friend actually broke his finger on a pickleball court.
Oh.
And when he got his therapy taken care of, the people in the medical center said, pickleball has really, really increased our business. because who plays pickleball mostly are older people who...
No, it's like a young kid's game now.
Okay.
It's becoming, anyways. I hear so many people talk about it.
And they're just injuring themselves because they don't have the mobility that the young person has. And so these guys are saying, we love pickleball. It's really helped our business. So
I hear pickleball and I think of a pickle in a ball gown.
welcome back to another episode of the Phoenix Chronicles. My name is Martin, and I used to weigh 660 pounds.
My name is Jes. I'm his daughter, and I'm at the beginning of my journey. And thanks for being back with us this week. Today, we are talking about a topic that may not be so fun to think about,
Absolutely.
but critically important,
Yes.
especially when it comes to trying to change your health life around.
Right. Absolutely.
We're going to talk about boundaries.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
Jump in.
Okay. Well, let's talk about boundaries for a second. Boundaries are a part of our life. They're a part of our everyday life. Everybody lives within boundaries. And I think one of the best metaphors to look at boundaries is to look at sports. I'm a football fan. I love college football. I love the NFL. I'm a Denver Bronco fan, so you can feel sorry for me right now. It's been a rough 10 years, although last year was better. But I'm a Denver Bronco fan right down to my bones. But I watch the games every week, and I watch the football games on Saturday with the college teams. I just love watching them because I love to watch the poetry in motion. I mean, it's just amazing what these young athletes can do. And when you see these guys do amazing plays, you got to realize that the plays only count if they're in bounds.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see a great play where a receiver will be in the end zone and he's got 1 foot down. All he's got to do is put one toe down and he puts it down in the end zone. Touchdown. He made a touchdown. Everybody's happy. And it's a remarkable catch. It's an amazing catch. It's just, absolutely athletically incredible to believe what you've even seen. But then you have the same kind of situation where you have that same scenario, receiver in the end zone, gets 1 foot down, but he doesn't get that toe in the end zone. Even though it's an amazing catch, it is an amazing play. What he did was absolutely phenomenal. Athletically, it was incredible. It doesn't count.
Mm-hmm.
If he doesn't get that second toe in bounds, it doesn't count. He's out of bounds. You got to have boundaries when you're playing sports. That's true of basketball and baseball, tennis, pickleball, which I'm told is something fun for old people to do. I haven't done it yet.
Well, no, what is up with pickleball? It's everywhere. I've missed something. I don't even know exactly what it is.
Pickleball is kind of a tennis game on a shorter court, and older people are playing it. And I got a friend who actually broke his finger on a pickleball court.
Oh.
And when he got his therapy taken care of, the people in the medical center said, pickleball has really, really increased our business. because who plays pickleball mostly are older people who...
No, it's like a young kid's game now. It's
okay.
becoming, anyways. I hear so many people talk about it.
But it began basically as an old people who couldn't play tennis, and they're just injuring themselves because they don't have the mobility that the young person has. And so these guys are saying, we love pickleball. It's really helped our business. So
I hear pickleball and I think of a pickle in a ball gown. Like a big fancy dress.
That would be cool. Well, that's not what it is. It's like a tennis game with a pickleball court. And basically, they all have boundaries to them. If you don't hit the ball in court, you're out of bounds. Point doesn't count. If it's in bounds, point counts. And so that's what all about. Now, boundaries are all about sports, but there's much more to do with boundaries than just sports. Our jobs have boundaries. When I was a teenager, I lived in Anaheim, California. My best friend at the time, Bill, his father owned Anaheim Disposal, a rubbish hauling company. And I had a summer job with Anaheim Disposal, and I loved it. I got to drive the big trucks, and I got to paint things, paint trash bins, and fix them all up. And I enjoyed my job a lot. But in August of every year, and I did it for like 4 years in a row, I did it every summer for 4 years. Every summer in August, the Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus came to
Oh,
town.
yeah.
Yeah, that was a great thing. It was there held in the Anaheim Convention Center. It was a great event for families. But if you have a circus, you most likely have elephants.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
Oh, no.
And my job every August was to go down to Santa Ana, go to the train yards, and there were 5 train cars. I mean, these cars were like 60 feet long and about 20 feet wide. And they were all filled with those lovely elephants left for me to clean up. And so in that hot time, I
Oh.
would go in there and I'd clean it up every year. And it took me like 8 hours to do all those cars. And if it wasn't closing time, they sent me home because they didn't want to enjoy my aroma when I came back from. They said, "Go home and shower, and don't come back until you've showered twice." Basically, just go away. Well, I did that 4 years in a row, and I was a good employee, and I did it. And I can't say I loved it, but there were other perks to the job I really enjoyed, so I came back every year. Well, one year, my senior year, I had a friend named Greg who I played football with and was also a friend of Bill's. And he needed a job for the summer, and so I recruited him in because by this time I'm kind of the supervisor of the yard boys in the Anaheim disposal yard there, and so I was able to bring him in, and they hired him. And we worked great all summer long. We painted bins, we delivered bins, we did specials, we did all kinds of things all year long, and he was a great worker. We had a great summer together. And then August came.
Mhm.
And when August came, I said, "Greg, today's a big day. Today's Circus Day." He said, "What's that?" I said, "Well, today's the day we go down to the Santa Ana railroad yard and clean out the railroad cars for the elephants. There's 5 large cars we got to clean out." He said, "What do you mean clean out?" I said, "It's what you think I mean. We got to get in there and get that straw and get that manure and get everything out of there and clean them all up." And he looks at me and says, "Yeah, no, I don't think so."
Over my dead body.
Basically, that's what he said. I said, "Greg, if you don't do this, they'll fire you." He said, "That's a good call." So he said, "I enjoyed my job here, but I'm all done now." So
Oh, wow.
the boundaries that were set by Anaheim Disposal that I lived within, Greg said, "Not going to do it."
Yeah.
And he said, "No, I'm not going to do that." And he didn't do that. So he violated the boundaries and he lost the job. But he probably smelled better than I did for years. But Greg was a great worker, but we had to there were boundaries to the job. There were things, if you had the job, you had to do. Whether you really wanted to do it or not, you had to do it. I think that's true of every job.
Yeah.
I think every job has something that people do that they don't want to do in their job, but if they're gonna keep their job, they're gonna stay within the boundaries of what the requirements of that job is, they're gonna do whatever's necessary to get that done. And that has a lot of different examples of that, but that's the best example I can think of was when Greg said, "Not gonna do it, not gonna do it." And that's what he said, and he didn't. And we got together later that night and played some basketball, and he said, "You're out of your mind." I said, "Well, there's no doubt about that. Everybody's known that for a long time." But that's an area where boundaries come into play. Another area where boundaries come into play is our relationships, and that can be friends. For example, if you have a best friend and he tells you something in private, he says, "I want to tell you something, but you can't tell somebody else. This is something that's private just between you. I'm telling you because you're my best friend, and I don't want you to tell anybody." That's a boundary that was set. And if you're going to honor that friendship, you're not going to tell anybody, no matter how they question you now, no matter how they try to trick you, you're not going to tell anybody what that secret is. And if you do violate that boundary, oftentimes that's the end of the best friend relationship. You might still be friends, but they'll never trust you the same way they did before. And that's a boundary that was set by the expectation of the person telling you that secret. There's boundaries in marriages. When those boundaries are violated, it often leads to broken relationships, divorces, destructions of family. And those are boundaries that mean when I got married, I said to my wife that I'm going to keep myself only to you as long as I live. That's a boundary. And
she said the same to you.
and she said the same to me. And the bottom line is that with that boundary set, now people can violate that boundary and be forgiven. That's happened many times. But other times with people, it's the end of the deal. And And I don't think that's right necessarily because, forgiveness is a part of life.
Mhm.
And if somebody really repents from what they've done and they can move forward and never do it again, well, then that's something that, is a boundary that's been reestablished, sometimes stronger than before.
Yeah.
Because when you're getting married and you're young and you're all in love, and they say to you, you're to keep yourself only to yourself and your wife for as long as you live. You're in deep love and you go, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can do that. I can do that. But then life comes up.
Mhm.
Life starts happening. Temptations start coming to us. And when those temptations start coming to us, and we're not in that infatuation type love, it can be easy to slip.
Mm.
And many people have, and many people do. The bottom line is that that's not the end of the day. That's not the end of the deal. That you can have a new boundary set with a new realization, and that can go forward for the rest of your life. And that's something that is happening there. There's also the boundary between parents and children.
Mhm.
Uh, and it goes both ways.
Mhm.
Parents have got to trust their children to be obedient, but children have got to trust their parents to be good Christian people.
To look out for. I talk with Adrian all the time about that. He won't understand, you know, some reason I say no to something, and then, I'll explain it to him, and he'll be just kinda arguing with me, and I get to a point where I'm like, "Buddy, do you trust me?
Mhm.
Do you trust me to do right by you and do what's best for you?" And he says, "Well, yeah." And I said, "Okay, it may not make sense, but I know some things that you'll learn as you grow, and I need you to trust me that, Daddy and I are gonna do what's best for you always."
And that always works very well until you somehow violate that trust. That can be a trust that you lose
Right.
with your children.
Right.
Also, children can lose the trust of their parents when they sneak out of the window and don't come home till 3 o'clock in the morning, and they're
Okay.
not you.
Oh, I did that though.
Oh, well, I didn't know. So, what
That was an exact example.
well, hello, America. Revelations in Daddy Marty Crow's life.
And
Anyway,
then I used to sneak out and go to Wiener Schnitzel and get corn dogs
that's better
at,
than going to a
like,
bar and getting
yeah, yeah, it was, but it was never until 3 a.m. Her little Geo Metro would roll down the we couldn't turn it on because it would be too loud. So we used to back it up, and use the momentum. It was wild, because that car was so sketchy and scary.
well,
Hi, Hannah.
hi, Hannah. I have words with you, young lady. I've got to talk to you about that Geo Metro. Anyway, so those are boundaries that we set and establish for ourselves. And one of the biblical examples of boundaries is the story of Samson and Delilah in Judges 13 through 16, chapters 13 through 16. And there it talks about a man by the name of Zorah, Zorah. And he's a man who has a wife, and his wife has told him that she can't get pregnant.
Mm,
And so what happens was an angel comes and says, "You can get pregnant. We're going to help you get pregnant, but what you have to do is drink no wine,
mhm,
eat nothing from the vine, eat no unclean things. You have to stay within those boundaries because if you do that, this young man is going to be born. He's going to be a Nazarite. He's going to be a powerful person." And that was Samson. And that's what she did. She kept those boundaries, and Samson became that. Later, when Samson was old and was ruling Israel, he was taken in by a woman who told him that he needed to tell her the secret of his strength. And he told her the secret of his strength. And she cut off his hair,
'cause that
which
was his
that was his
source
strength.
of his strength.
And they took out his eyes. Yeah. And they just mocked him then. The Philistines took over Israel and mocked him. And finally, they didn't pay attention to the fact that it was his hair. Guess what happened? His hair grew out. And when his hair grew out, he got that strength back. And he was blind and he was miserable. And so he went into the temple that they were worshiping in, where there were 3,000 people on top of the temple worshiping, not worshiping, partying. And he said, "Lead me to the pillars that hold the building up." And he went to the pillars and he pushed them, and the whole temple came tumbling down, killing him, but killing more Philistines than he ever did before. But that's the idea of boundaries and how you can deal with that, and we're gonna talk more about how you set boundaries in your diets as we go forward.
Yeah,
But that's basically what
the
out of
background
boundaries
of
boundaries.
boundaries.
Yeah.
Um, awesome. I'm gonna talk more, later on in this episode about another side of boundaries, but we have come up with a new segment.
I love this segment.
We're trying to, like, break things up and be a little more interesting, so we were thinking and, I'm gonna share, something that I've been doing with my son lately. He just turned 8, and, we call this Count Your Blessings or the GLAD game. Any, millennial gal out there, I mean, maybe boys too, but mostly gals, familiar with the 1960s Haley Mills movie, Pollyanna?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I loved, loved, loved Pollyanna, and I just if you haven't seen that movie, I highly recommend. It's on Disney Plus. It's an old Disney movie. Um, but Pollyanna is a little girl that has really tough life circumstances, but she has a relentless positive attitude and can find joy in, like, every circumstance. And my kiddo has a tendency to kind of, if something goes bad during his day, he just really it can, like, ruin the whole day, and it's hard for him to kinda move on. And, we've been working on creating, like, a turnaround, and so we came up with a game that we play. And the reason that we wanted to bring this segment in is, we talk about some pretty heavy stuff
Yeah.
in our episodes, and we are really challenging you guys to do some hard things and to face some hard realities in our lives. And we've talked about, having the perspective of joy and um, being thankful and gratitude, and how important that is for us to continue doing what we're trying to do, and to continue to allow God to work in our lives and put our heads in a space where that's possible. So, I'm just going to first kind of explain how we play the game. I won't do it as silly as I do it with my son.
Go ahead.
But I do this even on my own because I don't know about you, but especially when the days are hard, I need a perspective change a lot. Sometimes all day. I need to be keeping my brain in a good spot. So, um, we start off by okay, and I borrowed this from Bluey.
Good.
We love Bluey. So you're gonna think about the bad feelings that you're having, anger, depression, anxiety, frustration, disappointment, and we're gonna think about pulling it out, like, find where your body hurts or feels icky. This is kind of therapeutic and maybe silly sounding to some people, but I hold anxiety, like, in my chest or my stomach or something, so you're gonna think about pulling that out and throwing it up to God. And what I do with my son is we just, like, keep pulling out whatever feeling. He kinda keeps naming feelings or emotions and then just, like, throwing it up to God, and then we're gonna say just a really quick prayer. God, I give you these feelings. I do not want them. They are keeping me from being focused on you. I am entrusting them to you. I know you carry my burdens. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for always being by me, and thank you for taking this for me." So, like, a 30-second prayer around that. And then, we call it the Count Your Blessings because I grew up in a church that sang hymns, and whenever I think of this, I think of that song, Count Your
Count your
Blessings.
blessings. Name them one by one.
Count your blessings, see what God has done.
Right.
And so with my son, we sing just the first little bit of that song, and we get really silly when we sing it, and he's already starting to feel better at this point because 'cause we're being silly. And then we go back and forth naming things that we're thankful for until we're laughing and we feel better.
That's great.
So I do this with my son, but I also do this with myself throughout the day. I really do. I will have that moment where I say, "Okay, I'm gonna take the ick out and I'm gonna replace it the with the positive," and reminding myself that God is faithful and that he is good and that I have so much more than I already realize. And so I do this for myself in a different version, but so I am thankful for trees.
Well, I'm thankful for you.
I'm thankful for you.
Well, you've copied me.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for my wife.
I'm thankful for my husband.
I'm thankful for my salvation.
I'm thankful for cars.
Oh, cars are a good thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I hate to walk. Okay, I'm thankful for our studio.
Oh, yes. Yeah, new studio.
Yeah,
Hey.
hey.
New setup. I'm thankful for toilet paper because could you imagine?
No, I don't wanna imagine
Yeah.
that at all. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna even think about
No,
that.
don't.
Okay,
I mean, we've lived it in 2020. How many of you are having dark flashbacks right now?
I'm not. I stocked up. Anyway,
So you just kind of keep going back and forth until you feel lighter, brighter, and you're feeling thankful.
it's
So
good.
we're gonna keep coming back to this. I've just kind of explained the background of it and everything, but we're going to just like play this game back and forth and keep ourselves in a thankful mindset because it's going to help you in every area of your
It
life
does,
if
it
you are
really
focusing
does.
on
That's
gratitude.
good.
So
Okay, we're gonna take a break right now. When we come back, I'm gonna talk about setting boundaries for your diet. I'm also gonna introduce another new segment
yeah.
called Jesus Freak. And if you don't know what that means, come back and find out.
Yeah. All right, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. So, as we mentioned before break, we are introducing another new segment called Jesus Freaks.
There was a singing group called DC Talk. In 1995, they came out with a song called Jesus Freaks.
I was obsessed with that song. I think I was probably in 5th grade.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have been like 9 or something. I loved that song, and I had books by DC Talk called Jesus Freaks, volumes 1 and 2, and they just tell stories of people's incredible faith journeys.
It's amazing. And, you know, the name Jesus Freaks in the 60s, where I grew up in the 60s, was a pejorative term. It was labeled because there was the Jesus movement of the 1960s where so many people, young people, came to know Christ. The Pacific Ocean was filled with people being baptized, and it was just growing leaps and bounds among young people. And a lot of the hippies at that time fell into that. And people who didn't appreciate the reality of what was going on started calling them Jesus freaks in a negative way.
Yeah,
But
because they were freaks for Jesus.
that's right. But
But
DC Talk turned on that and turned that around to something positive.
yeah,
And that's what they're saying. Nothing wrong with being a Jesus freak.
no, I want
It's
to be a freak for
I want to
Jesus.
be a freak for Jesus. And so they did that. And
The world is going to look at you funny when you start living your life for Jesus.
they are. And there's this book that I have called Jesus Freaks Out by DC Talk. And in this is filled with stories of martyrs, people who were such freaks that they were either martyred or they were threatened with martyrdom, but they never denied their faith.
And martyrdom is like dying for your faith.
Dying for your
Yeah,
faith. Yeah,
being killed.
absolutely. And the first one I read about was a man by the name of Abu Fadi. He was in Iraq in 2014. And what was happening in the world in 2014, there was this group called ISIS.
Mm.
And they called themselves the ISIS. They were actually the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. And what they basically did was they terrorized people, including other Muslims. And there was a time that Abu Fadi lived in the town of Mosul, the second largest town in Iraq. And he heard that ISIS was coming. And he was a Christian. He and his wife were Christians. Now, they'd been able to live fine in Iraq being a Christian. There wasn't persecution. There wasn't appreciation of them, but they weren't threatened with their life. But when ISIS came in, they said, "You'll be a Muslim or you will die. You're going to die if you're not a Muslim. We'll cut your head off right now if you don't become a Muslim." And so as these forces came, now Iraq had its own military forces, about 30,000 in the town of Mosul. And those 30,000 fled to stay away from the 1,500 ISIS warriors because they were deadly. They were fierce, and they were terrifying. And so they fled. So there was no protection for Abu Fadi and his wife. And so they tried to get out of the city. And when ISIS came to the city, they said, "If you're not a Muslim, you do not live in this city. You have to be a Muslim to live in this city."
Mm-hmm.
And so based on that, they said, "Well, we're going to leave then." That's easier said than done. because what happened was there were checkpoints.
Mm-hmm.
And as they were leaving the city, they said, "Why are you leaving the city? Are you just moving to another city? Why are you leaving the city?"
Mm-hmm.
"Because we're Christians."
Oh, they said that?
They said that. They proclaimed, "Because we are Christians
Mm-hmm.
and we're not welcome here." And right there at the first checkpoint, they said, basically, if you're a Christian, you have to convert to Muslim right now, or we will cut your head off right now. We will kill you. And he said, "Well, go ahead and do it then." And he and his wife stood there ready to do it. And they said they wanted to make examples of these people.
Right.
And so they told them, "Well, give us all your money and all your possessions, and we'll let you go on."
Oh.
So they gave up all their earthly possessions, all their money, all their furniture. They were just walking on their own now. And as they walked on their own, they went to another checkpoint. And that checkpoint said, "We're taking all your possessions." Well, all they had left was some jewelry that was private. They took all that jewelry and they let them go to the next one. This last one, they had nothing to give.
Yeah.
And they would not deny their faith. And they prayed about it. And they said, "Father, we're ready to go. We're not going to deny our faith no matter what it means." And that last checkpoint before they got out of Mosul said, "We're going to let you go. But you tell everybody that anybody who tries to leave here as a Christian is going to die." And later Christians that came through did die.
Hmm.
So they were willing to give up their life for their faith. And the reason we bring this up is that's a great, we talk about offering your body a living sacrifice to God every day. The people in this book offered their bodies literally every day to sacrifice to God. Most of them didn't live.
And I think we talked about, because obviously this is going to be a heavy segment. These are heavy topics.
These are.
This is intense. The reason we talked about wanting to share these stories is, and I don't know where you are watching from, where you live, what your circumstances are like with religious freedom, with whatever faith you practice. Living in America, we have religious freedom and we do not face these types of situations.
Right.
There are cases of people being imprisoned for faith and things like that. And we're not going to talk about politics or anything like that here. But for the most part, I have never faced any situation remotely near
Right.
someone even being, I've never had to talk to a police officer or face anything because of me practicing my faith or reading my Bible in a park or anything like that. And I'm so far removed from the reality that happens all over the world for some people that it's in a weird way helpful for me to realize the reality of this from my perspective.
Right. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
we're going to be sharing other stories from Jesus Freaks as we go on our other episodes. And I think it's going to be something we can look at and say, if these people were willing to sacrifice these things, their very life, can I at least sacrifice by being true to a diet, staying on my diet, worshiping, praying, studying the Bible every day? Can I at least do that?
And being thankful that I have the freedom to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I'm going to continue talking about our topic, which is boundaries now. We had a little break doing some other segments, but I'm going to talk about boundaries. So, the first time I was asked the question, does God want us to have boundaries? I was kind of stumped. I don't know why. I was like, boundaries? Yeah? Yeah, I think so. I guess so. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. Yes, absolutely. That's kind of, the Christian life, when we are trying to live according to the word, is boundaries, like across the board.
Right.
We are meant to stand out and to live differently than the rest of the world. And so I never thought about it when it came to food, though.
Right.
Like having boundaries about food, I was like, I never, like I've talked about so many times here, I've never put my faith in with my food stuff until recently. So when this was first positioned to me, I was like totally stumped by it. And we are supposed to say no to ourselves in so many areas. No, I can't eat that, or I shouldn't watch that. I shouldn't buy that. I shouldn't listen to that. I shouldn't go to that place. If I'm going to be true to my faith and the walk that I'm trying to live out, it's full of saying no to myself.
Yeah.
And let's just be honest about that. That can be a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
That can be difficult to accept. And especially, I mean, sometimes I think food is just a place we comfortably let slip.
Right.
It's something that can be done relatively culturally pretty guilt-free.
Well, go to the potlucks,
Right.
go to church and eat.
Absolutely. I mean, almost everything we do around church centers around food when it's like, not church service, but if there is an event or something you're going to, there's often food, and it's part of what we do. So when I was thinking about starting to apply boundaries to my eating, I was like, I need help figuring this out because I don't know exactly what I'm looking for here. And I want to be clear about one thing. We're going to talk about the differences between restriction and boundaries. So often, I think diets fall into the restriction,
Right.
where it's just don't eat this, don't eat this, don't eat that, don't even look at that. And that the thing about restriction is that it is punishment and shame centered. And it's all based on what I can do on my own. It's based on my willpower, right? Like the
Right.
discipline, the willpower you hear willpower all the time when we're talking about diets. And we look at boundaries as being more um, positive, life focused, God centered. And so we're looking at God to give us the strength, not ourselves,
Right.
which is something you can count on. So turning to God for our strength and our comfort instead of the food or the whatever vice you are struggling with that you're wanting to change. And I can say I've lived both ways. I have lived totally restricted, where I was miserable because I was obsessing over everything I ate. I used to weigh myself multiple times a day to see, after eating this one thing, how did that change my weight? I was obsessed. It was all I thought about, all I cared about. And it was so soul sucking. Just, ugh. I felt dead inside so much because I was constantly trying to meet these really, really strict rules that gave no room for life circumstances at all. And then I've also lived totally indulgent. I have lived with zero rules at all about food. And that's also really not a great place to live
No.
because you get lots of consequences for that. When you live with no rules and no boundaries, I have had horrible consequences from living that way. So boundaries is the sweet spot. Boundaries is the happy medium where it's positive and it is going to be um it's like a playbook. So you talk about sports as an analogy with boundaries. I also think of the same thing. So with boundaries, if I'm trying to win a game, if I'm only playing defensively, I'm going to lose because there's not going to be any points scored. When we don't have boundaries and we are just responding to life, we're reacting to everything happening around us, and we don't have structure. And I'm not just talking about diet. The boundaries come into play with our emotions and all of those other things as well. When we don't have any structure, we are constantly playing defensive.
Mm-hmm.
We're just on the defense all the time. That is stressful.
Very stressful.
It takes up a lot of mental space. It also, you're going to be letting yourself down because if you said, well, I'm going to follow my diet today, but you've got no structure around that and you don't know what your set boundaries are and you haven't prayed to God about what my boundaries are supposed to be, you're going to be halfway through the day and feeling like you messed up a whole bunch and the day's totally gotten away from you, and then you feel like you've got no control. God gave us a spirit of self-control. So we can have self-control if we allow him to cultivate this in us, but we have to do our part. We have to know how we're setting up our boundaries. So I found a book when I was going through this process. Gosh, this was back before my son was born. Barb Raveling. She's written 2 books. I Deserve a Donut. And I think her first book was called A Taste of Truth. And she was the person who initially introduced me to the idea of having boundaries around food, and that's biblical. And it leads to a better life. And
Yeah.
my brain exploded. So I don't have The Taste of Truth with me, but that's more of like a workbook. I highly recommend these books. I can't recommend them enough. I Deserve a Donut is where she goes into emotions and lies that we start to believe about reasons why we need to eat, like I deserve a donut, or I can just start tomorrow, or today was really hard and I
I'll
deserve a
start Monday
treat.
next week.
Right, like all of these excuses and lies that we start to believe and make up, and or just reacting to feelings, when all of that is going to keep us from following our boundaries. And then she gives you excellent examples of how to make your boundaries. I'm just going to show you a little bit here. Um, okay, I don't know if you can see this. This is her book of topics, of all the different like types of eating that we do: indulgence eating, anxiety eating, self-image eating. I have a lot of them. I have there's many. And I'm gonna read really quick here just a section from one of her books that'll give you just a taste of what she talks about. So, says, "Do you think God wants you to follow your boundaries? Why or why not?" And these are all journal prompts too, like in her other book where it gets you to really kind of evaluate things. When you go through the questions, those journal prompts, be sure to fully answer the whys and why nots. In order for us to change the way we think, we need to actually think. That means putting in some effort into our thought life. The whys and why nots will help you put some effort into your thought life. Does God really care if you follow your boundaries? Why or why not? Try to answer that question as fully as possible. Here's how I answered it. Yes, God wants me to follow my boundaries because he knows I can become obsessed with food. He also knows that I turn to food for emotional support, and he knows that I procrastinate with food. God wants me to love him, not food, with all my heart. He wants me to turn to him, not food, for emotional support. And he wants me to turn to him, not food, for help with writing. So those are her examples. Um, this book is such a helpful resource. I will also share just I think one of the ones I have in here: indulgence eating. I've talked about indulgence.
Right.
Okay. So, what is super cool about this is the ideas behind it is when you are facing a moment of wanting to eat, okay? And you are blessed to be at least on the offense enough that you're not just going to react to jump into it without thinking. You are actually going to pause for a second and allow yourself to do some of these steps. So, she has these questions that you ask yourself in this situation. Why don't you feel like following your boundaries today?
Uh-oh.
Who wants to answer that? Um, that's a tough one. Why do you feel like eating? How much would you need to eat before you could honestly say, that's enough, I don't want any more? And then after, so she has like 10 questions here that really help you kind of get to a point where you're like, is this really worth it?
Right.
Is this really going to be worth, am I really going to feel better when I do this? Then this is really cool. She has so many Bible verses that deal with a specific topic that you're reading about, that we can pray over ourselves, we can speak over our hearts and our minds. Hebrews 12:11, all discipline for the moment seems not to be joyful, but sorrowful. How true is that of dieting?
Absolutely.
Yet to those who have been trained by it, afterwards it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. I think this book is so helpful and valuable for us to start putting together these ideas of having boundaries in our lives around food and what are those boundaries. She also has an app. I think it's called I Deserve a Donut, and it's free. And it's basically this book on your phone. It has all of the different topics, the emotions, the lies, all the scriptures and the questions. It has all of that available for you. So I recommend Barb Raveling's books so much to anybody wanting to um, figure out how to set out boundaries. And so let me give you an example of what boundaries look like. So you pick whatever diet plan, like just like what we said, this is you pick whatever diet plan that works for you. So say Atkins. We're gonna do Atkins diet. And you say, I'm gonna do Atkins diet every day. This is what it's gonna look like. You write these down, you write down what the diet is, what it looks like. That's your diet boundary. But then you also have a boundary around it's my birthday and I'm going to have a piece of cake on my birthday. I'm only going to do this. Like your boundary is, this is my holiday eating. This is what I can do. And then the next day I'm back on my diet
Right.
or I go on vacation. And when I come back, part of my boundaries is that I do a cleanse for 3 days to clean myself out of all the garbage I just ate, whatever it is. But the idea is that it's flexible around life so that it can be done long term, if not for your life. You can also change your boundaries. You can change them as you go along, but you don't change your boundaries on a whim in the moment when you're feeling like it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So I just want to encourage you, really think about what boundaries you're going to have. And I include in mine, water, sleep, spiritual, all of that. And then when you're in a situation, you can ask yourself, is this in my boundaries or not? And if it's not in my boundaries, what am I going to gain from this? Or what am I going to lose if I break my boundary? I think this is a really great way of looking at this,
Right.
and you can apply it to absolutely anything. I encourage you to find your scriptures, whatever ones work for you, and write them down on note cards. When I was first doing this practice, I had them written on note cards all over the place. I had them in my car, I had them on the fridge, I had them in my wallet, I had them in my bathroom, just kind of put up everywhere so that you have these scriptures. It takes so much work to change our hearts and our minds. It does. It's a big practice. It's work. It takes consistency. It doesn't just happen overnight. And she talks about, our thought life. We have to put effort in if we want to have change. Um, so God can help you do all of this with everything that we ever talk about. I encourage you to spend time in prayer this week with God about what kind of boundaries does he want you to set? What boundaries do you need to have for things that are, pitfalls for you emotionally, especially? A big part of why a lot of us are in the situations we're in is because we go to food for emotional and, mental support.
Right.
So having boundaries around that is going to be key. So now we're going to jump into audience feedback.
Yes.
We love this section so much.
I'm going to give feedback from somebody who gave me feedback before, but he gave me more feedback. His name is Jonathan, and he's been very helpful to me to see what we're doing that is right. And one of the things he said was, when you talk about using your method to lose weight, keep it off, you can take lose weight out of it and put porn addiction. You can lose weight out of it and talk about alcohol, drugs,
Shopping,
anything that you're out of balance with. You can take,
codependency.
yes, you can take these principles and apply them prayerfully, and they will help you avoid the pitfall of that very situation. And he's right. I mean, he's absolutely right. I know it's hard to believe, but your reflections group
Regeneration.
I'm sorry, regeneration, regeneration. One of the biggest addictions there is porn addiction, and these are people from church. It's a reality because it's so
Men and women too.
Yeah, it's so accessible, and these applications and these spiritual concepts can be used to help people in any area where they want to overcome something that has overtaken them and is ruining their life. And that's what we are doing here. And he made that comment to me, and I appreciated it so much because he sees the core of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to really help people establish a deep and powerful relationship with their Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's what we're really doing. And as we do that, we can take care of these vices and get rid of them. And on a permanent basis, we can change them as we continue to do the program on and on and on.
I have to be honest, I had to do boundaries around shopping.
Yeah.
Because what will happen too, when you start setting boundaries in one area, it's very common for another thing to slip in to that purpose. So when I started being able to follow my eating boundaries, shopping kind of slipped in as that emotional support thing where I was now getting the highs and feeding my lows
Right.
off of buying that thing that I thought I would, love and that would make me feel better.
Right.
And that doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't work.
Doesn't
So anyways, just be aware of that too. As you're setting boundaries, watch for other things to slip in. That's a really common thing.
And finally, we're going to talk about the lessons of our lesson today. And one of the things I want to talk about is asking the question, how do we set boundaries with our diet? How do we set boundaries with our weight loss? And the first thing I would ask you to do in setting this up is to ask yourself a question. Do you have to lose weight? Is it a must for you? Is this something you really have to do? Or would you like to just lose a few pounds?
Is it something you're like,
I could, I could lose some weight.
I could, or are you like dedicated? Are you committed?
Because if you're committed, you won't be stymied by boundaries. You'll be upheld by them. They will help you see pathways for you to accomplish the goals that you have. That's the beautiful thing about weight loss as a goal. You have a scale over a week's time that tells you if you're doing well or you're not. It gives you now you can't get caught up on the scale too much. You've got to be careful with that. But as you're succeeding and you see the progress that you're making, it emboldens you, makes you stronger, makes you able to do a better job of it week after week after week until you reach the goal that you want to have. And then to keep the weight off, you have to have that same boundary of going out there and doing the program over and over and over again. And when you make it a part of your day, you set aside a time specifically for this in your day, you will accomplish those things. And most importantly, you will have a greater relationship with God than you ever dreamed of. You will have a greater relationship with Jesus, and you'll come to really understand the Holy Spirit and how He works in your life. And for me, that's been huge for me, is to be able to do that and see that. So that's the physical lesson. There's a spiritual side too, and you want to talk about that, or I've got an idea about the spiritual side.
There you go.
Okay. When I came to the church I'm going to right now, New Life, Greater Little Rock, Arkansas, Maumelle, Arkansas, I did not have a deep relationship with God. I knew God, but I didn't know Him.
Right.
I knew Jesus, but I didn't know Him.
Yeah.
I knew of the Holy Spirit, but boy, I really didn't know Him.
Yeah.
The involvement in that church has led me to really recognize that all three of these things are possible. Because we just don't go to church. We go to church, we have a great Sunday, we worship. Worship is powerful and wonderful. But then after the worship is over, some people just get up and go home. But I don't do that. They encourage you to get involved in life groups and Bible studies, all kinds. And so what I'm doing right now is I have an event I go to every Tuesday morning at 6:30 that helps me a Bible study. Wednesday night at 7 o'clock helps me a Bible study. Thursday night, a thing called Reflections, which
you go to Reflections.
I go to
That's
Reflections. Right. And then on Thursday morning, I go to this thing with the Friendly Church down in Little Rock with Brother Paul. Just amazing things. So I'm constantly busy doing things, and all of it builds my faith and builds my relationship with God, to where I do have a relationship with God right now, and it's deep, and it's getting deeper every day. The more I get in there and pray and praise and study His Word, the deeper my relationship grows. And so that's the spiritual lesson that we have today.
Yeah, I can say very similarly. I've been raised in church my whole life, but what has happened in my faith since moving here and being involved in the church that we are, the resources available, the classes,
Oh, they're amazing.
the knowledge is just mind-boggling. I mean, so I can say similarly, I feel like I have a completely different relationship with God, and it's constantly growing.
Yeah.
I think that, and that's an area of my life I've really had to put boundaries in to keep my commitments, because I find that during the week, especially, and with a little kid, I just get so tired and I don't want to go. I don't want to go after being at work. I don't want to sit and read my Bible after I put my son to bed. I don't want to read my Bible every day because I've got this, that, or the other thing to do, or I'm hooked on this new show and I'd rather do that. Like, I have to follow my boundaries
I do too.
about putting God first in my life and making Him the center of everything that I do.
Right.
that's been an important boundary that I've had to make.
But we're doing it.
Yeah.
We're growing in it.
So thank you so much for being with us this week. We hope this was valuable to you, and please spend some time with God this week asking him some questions for you about boundaries. Check out our website, thephoenixchronicles.com. We've got a ton of resources, free resources, and you can just check out all kinds of information we have for you on there. And then please like and subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next week.
Hey, God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Bye.